College football season is week 0 coming up this Saturday. A lot of things to talk about. Ole Miss having a bunch of recruits get ready to come to campus the weekend after. And we're also going to just talk about what Ole Miss needs to do in their first game. That is next here on the Portal Podcast crossover with Locked On Ole Miss.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover edition of Locked On the Portal with Locked On Ole Miss. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're not listening to me, go check out Steven Willis on Locked On Ole Miss. He's pretty much as dialed in as anybody on the Rebels and what's going on in the Southeastern Conference. Today, again, we're going to be talking about all things Ole Miss, plus week 0. We got Farmageddon, Iowa State, Kansas State. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Even have Stanford and Hawaii. I mean, this is a new time in college football for me. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's get to it. To help me finalize every detail, Mr. Steven Willis himself. Steven, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing quite well. I am ready for a little Farmageddon action where Iowa State and Kansas State kicks off from Ireland. I don't know how they're going to get the tractors there, but Farmageddon's going to happen in Ireland.
That is a great point. I don't know how they came up with the idea to play over there, but it's actually a very long-standing rivalry between the two institutions. I think it's cool, and they're two of the better programs in the Big 12. Good quarterbacks, some pretty good coaches. I think that'll be fun. But I want to start off with the recruiting for Ole Miss. They're just under 20 commitments for the class of 2026. Demarius Yates is one of my favorite players in this class, regardless of position. He's a young man that I saw at Under Armour down in New Orleans. I want to talk a little bit about him and overall. But as you and I have noted multiple times, Ole Miss has not done well recruiting inside their state borders this year. For whatever the reason.
Yeah.
So when I called you today, you said we need to talk about kids they're trying to get on campus to try to flip. And I'm like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. So among a plethora of possibilities, because honestly, Stephen, even for the state of Mississippi, which is really good for high school football, I'd say this is a little bit above average, to put it mildly, especially with linemen, which we've talked about it a million times. If Ole Miss is really going to make a jump as a program, they got to get the linemen. Well, the top 3 offensive linemen are not going there. That's probably my first thing. Nolan Wilson's committed to Alabama. That's not good. Texas got Corey Wells, who's a pretty good defensive lineman. It's just been all over the place. And then a couple of guys we just talked about a minute ago, Jase Mathews committed to Auburn. He's one of the best receivers in the country. Xavier McDonald committed to Sacramento State. That's 100% a money grab, obviously. So I'm curious, which player or players do you think are the biggest priorities to flip? Obviously, Tristen Keys committed to LSU too. Which player or players are the biggest priorities to flip, and who do they got to get back on campus at the Grove?
Yeah, over the last week, Ole Miss hired Donte Moncrief to kind of fill that in-state czar Kelvin Bolden role that he was doing such a good job before, and this year has just been an abject disaster. So Ole Miss hires Donte Moncrief, but the problem is a lot of the official visits for these players have already happened. They've come to campus. They've seen what's happened. They've heard the pitch. They've already been there. So Donte Moncrief, the only way that he can touch these players and try and recruit them is on in-game visits. So what we have to pay attention to, Ole Miss starts off with 5 out of their first 6 games at home. Most every one of them is at 2:30 or at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, which means you can have a big recruiting weekend that weekend if you choose to do that. The first player that I think is going to be on the list is Jase Mathews. Jase Mathews and Donte Moncrief have a really close relationship. Ole Miss was the number 2 in the Jase Mathews sweepstakes. And if Auburn, for some reason, gets off to a very slow start, gets beat by Baylor, and they go and do their typical nuclear bomb thing around the coaching staff, there's a window for Donte Moncrief to kind of squeeze in. It's like, hey, come back over to the good side. Nolan Wilson's been up to Oxford several times. Tristen Keys, we've talked about that on this show. He signed with Adidas. He's going to end up at an Adidas program. And with Tennessee ending up at Adidas program, I genuinely think he's going to end up at Tennessee. I think that's the location for Tristen Keys. But you talk about the lineman, the kid from New Albany that is on the list. Ole Miss has done fine out of state. They're out of state hall. Ole Miss has a top 20 recruiting class, and they've only signed one player out of the top 17 players in the state of Mississippi. That is absolutely weird to think about, but that is because of how good they have been out of state. So it's going to be on Donte Moncrief and Ole Miss to flip one or two of these players, because you don't want the narrative of failing in state to become a stigma, and a stigma becomes a problem.
I would agree. I think that they're in a situation where they've got to figure it out sooner than later in terms of the ability to get some of these guys on campus. And it's not this weekend, as a reminder. Ole Miss doesn't play until the following when they play Georgia State. But for me, it's about the linemen. I think that Ole Miss, when they recruit high school offensive and defensive linemen, especially out of their own state, at a high clip, you mentioned Nolan Wilson, one of the better defensive linemen, not only in the state of Mississippi, but in the country. When you get those kids, Ole Miss is a different program. Emmanuel Tucker from New Albany. I mean, he's 30 minutes from campus. He's committed to LSU. That's just no bueno.
Well, one thing to look at is like LSU plays at Clemson. So Emmanuel Tucker can't go see LSU play this weekend. Does he end up in Oxford? That's the question. That's what you need to look for.
I like Bryson Cooley as much, if not more, than any of the linemen in state, because he's such a power player. He's another kid, but he's South Mississippi, if I remember right. He's West Jones High School.
West Jones, that's down in Laurel around Hattiesburg.
Okay. Well, that's a kid that's also committed to LSU. I mean, there's some good players. J. Raylan McCoy, he's committed to Florida. We'll see how this goes. But if they don't get any of those linemen, there's no other way around it. That's failure. Yeah. You can't allow that many big bodies to walk out of your state, because that's where Georgia, LSU, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee have usually made their hay. Ole Miss is going to catch them. They got to get some of those kids. Secondarily, it would be surprising to me if they didn't land any of the really good receivers in state. Yeah. That is the most, like, they've always done so well with that. That's more eye-opening. Like linemen that they've been hot and cold with for decades, but receiver with Lane Kiffin, that's shocking. I'm going to go on record and say they're going to get one of them. I don't know which one it's going to be. And maybe they get another kid out of state too. I don't know. But I would be very, very surprised, Steven, if the Rebels do not sign one of these in-state kids and or another kid out of state that's a receiver that's a highly coveted player. It's not hard to settle Lane Kiffin's offense. It's not.
Yeah, and the Corey Barber out of Alabama, really good player at wide receiver. Jamison Powell out of Sacramento, California, really good player at wide receiver. We're just concentrating on the Mississippi ties, Mississippi players. I only think that Ole Miss is going to take one if it's available. I think they're pretty well booked up at the wide receiver position. I think that Ole Miss is trying to throw haymaker after haymaker about Jase Mathews going into this season. I think that recruitment is far from over. I just do.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I know there's a lot of opportunity to get him on campus. So we'll see how that goes. But when we come back, I want to talk about the Georgia State game. Does Ole Miss need to make a statement in that game? What do they need to work on? And a lot of other stuff to discuss. That is next here on the Portal Podcast and Locked On Ole Miss crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one financial tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or in your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. With Monarch Money, it makes it easy for you and your significant other to view all your finances in one place, making it convenient to help yourselves, your kids, and your grandchildren. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who look for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for your MVP, eyeing a bold shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race, maybe, or perhaps you've got somebody you really think is going to win it. For me, it's Joe Burrow. Maybe for you, it's Saquon Barkley. Whoever it is, FanDuel lets you make your decision. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, my friend. Thank you once again for coming in and checking us out, by the way. Locked on Ole Miss, locked on the portal. Steven, the Georgia State game is not exciting to me because they should roll them. But there is one primary category that I'm curious about because I want to know if I was right. And then I also want to ask you where you think they need to work on. But Austin Simmons has to be good. I think game one, he needs to look sharp because he's got to take at least some of the leadership role, even though he's a young guy. He should technically be a freshman in college right now, but he graduated high school not 1, but 2 years early. It's wild. Do you think there's another position besides quarterback? And anytime you got a first-year quarterback starter, that's a priority. What other position do you think needs to look really good against Georgia State?
The wide receiver and tight end position, the pass catchers need to look good. A lot of that has to do with Austin Simmons and how he does. On my podcast a little bit earlier in the week, I mentioned that 2 debuts from quarterbacks is kind of the bookend. There was the Eli Manning debut to where he completed like his first 18 passes, had 5 touchdowns in the game. And then there was the Michael Spurlock debut in 2004. He was the quarterback that went after Eli Manning. He had a struggle bus game to the point where you heard all of the hype about how good this guy was going to be. And he just, at that point, you're like, no, that's not going to happen. So I think Austin is going to be somewhere in the middle of that. I think Austin needs to look in control. He needs to look comfortable, and he doesn't need to try to be Jackson Dart or Matt Corral. He just needs to be Austin Simmons. And if he does that, the offense and the skill players are good enough to do some damage for him. He doesn't have to force it. He doesn't have to force big plays to happen because you're set up to be pretty successful with what is actually on the field. And with Ole Miss having a running game potentially this year, with Kejuan Lacey at running back or Logan Diggs or Damian Taylor, I think that's going to help out Austin Simmons so much. That in the tight end room, that is going to be a gift that honestly Jackson Dart didn't necessarily have, even though he had Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans in the running back. I think the tight end room and the running back room is going to help out Austin Simmons a ton.
I would agree that having a deep running back room helps any quarterback, especially one that's just getting his first opportunity to be the main player. Handing off and seeing it be 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4 is a good friend. So with that, my other question for you, Steven, how confident that the offensive line will show continuity? That's one of the bigger question marks if you read the Ole Miss message boards wherever you go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, continuity, I don't know. It's like you just said. Right now, the freak out point to the Ole Miss fan base is the offensive line. Now, I think the offensive line has the pieces to be really good. I think Jaden Williams, you know what you have with him. He's going to be the right tackle likely. Patrick Kudus getting some work. I think the right side of the offensive line is going to be pretty good. Diego Pounds on the left side. But after that, it becomes a little bit of a crapshoot. They like Delano Townsend. He was likely going to be the starter. He went down for a little bit to cost him some time. It doesn't look like anything really major, according to Lane Kiffin. But P.J. Wilkins, the transfer from Charlotte, is he going to be the left guard? Terez Davis, is he going to factor in the interior of that line? And then Bryson Sanders, 4-star recruit out of the Baylor School in Chattanooga. I think the pieces are in place for this offensive line, but continuity is going to have to be developed as the season goes on, in my opinion.
Well, they got Georgia State first weekend. Who do they have second weekend?
Kentucky. At Kentucky.
Kentucky on the road, believe it or not, that's a pretty raucous crowd as a general rule. And you can say whatever you want about Kentucky's defense. Like they're lost some pieces, this and that. They're just well coached. So if the offensive line doesn't bring their lunch pail, that Kentucky game, I know they lost to them. They'll be motivated because of last year. They can't take that game lightly in any way, shape, or form because Kentucky will be able to tackle well. They will not give up easy yards. So that'll be a pretty good measuring stick, in my opinion. My only other question about it is how well are they going to pass protect because they got Georgia pretty early in the season and they got so many big-time pass rushers and athletic guys up front. If they can't handle Kentucky, the Georgia game could go sideways.
Yeah, Georgia is the 7th game of the season. So there is a little bit of time to get that done. But before Georgia, you think about it, there's Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane, LSU in 4 games before the Georgia Bulldogs. So you will have the questions answered before the Georgia Bulldogs come up on the schedule.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. The LSU game, they're not as good as Georgia up front, but they got McKinley and they've got a few other guys that are pretty well known for their pass rushing ability. They're not as deep, but that's obviously a game you got to score a ton of points because LSU can put points on the board too. So that might be one of the best college football games of the year from an aesthetic standpoint. That could be 38-35 with 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. So I'm curious about that game.
And it's the best looking game in college football. The yellow, white, yellow, and then Ole Miss when they wear their navy blue lids with the red jerseys and the gray pants is the best looking game in college football.
It's pretty darn good. It really is. Anybody else, like defensively, any individual players that Ole Miss needs to see kind of stand up and take ownership? Or is this, let's just see what happens. We need to see these guys play. We don't really know what we're getting against Georgia State.
Yeah, the back end of the defense, the safeties, it looks like it's going to be like the first half of camp. That was one of the problem areas. That was one of the freak out points in the Ole Miss fan base. But the last week or so of camp, you haven't heard about the safeties. And I tell people all the time, you only hear about positions that are doing really well are doing really poorly. If you don't hear about them, no news is good news whenever they were a problem area at the beginning. Whiteout Williams kind of making a little bit of a run at the end of camp to the point where Jalen Braxton has been pushed back to cornerback. The cornerback position for Ole Miss is going to be really good, I think. But the back end, Whiteout Williams, Sage Ryan, eventually TJ Banks, Kapina Gushikin, those are going to be the key players for the game, and there's going to be an all eyes on them type situation.
Well, if the back end holds up, teams are going to have to score against Ole Miss, so they're going to get challenged. Teams are going to throw it up because that was Ole Miss's Achilles heel last year at times. I mean, they had a really good defense, but when they got beat, every now and then it was over the top, like Florida game, et cetera. They had a few of those goof ups that cost them, but they don't have that same front seven this year in terms of experience. It's still underrated, but I don't think they're going to have the same pass rush they did last year. So really important for the safeties to step up. And if they do, then Ole Miss can be in playoff hunt. We'll see how that goes. When we come back, we're going to talk about week 0, a little bit of fun with all the tractors over in Ireland, as Steven mentioned earlier. Farmageddon, that is next here on the Portal Podcast crossover with Locked On Ole Miss. All right, Steven. Ole Miss doesn't play this weekend, but that doesn't mean we don't have college football. I mean, I know you're not like super over the top about Stanford and Hawaii. Neither am I. But Farmageddon is pretty good. Mm-hmm. Let's start with that. Like, those schools don't necessarily like each other. They played forever. They've got some pretty good quarterbacks. I've seen both of them play. I know one of them. Quarterback at Iowa State, grew up not that far from where I used to live in the Tampa area. I'm really curious to see how this one goes because one or both of them could end up in the Big 12 title game. So it's weird that they play week 0 but good for them. And they want exposure for their fan bases, and they're making this, I'm sure, a lot of money off all the travel packages they're selling to go to Ireland. But what is your interest in this game from a rooting standpoint, or you just want to watch college football?
Well, whenever this game, the reason it's so heated is both of these teams were the only team that Iowa State and Kansas State could beat back in the Big 8 days. It was one of those games that was competitive. It was a rivalry by necessity, kind of. And
they were terrible.
Yeah. Kansas State and Iowa State used to be just hot garbage. And in the era of the Big 2+6, you had that going on. So that competitive thing, they started to pay attention to that, because other than Kansas State and Kansas, and then other than the Cyhawk game against the Iowa Hawkeyes that they were getting rolled in, the Kansas State-Iowa State game, that was a chance for them to get a W. And there were years with Kansas State and Iowa State where the difference between a good season, which was 4-7 or something at that point, and a bad season, which was 3-8, was winning this football game. And that's one of the reasons that I'm looking forward to that game. I love that college football's back. We're going to cook out and treat it like a Super Bowl, the whole 9 yards this weekend. We are going to celebrate college football being back, but I am genuinely interested in this game. Kansas State has beautiful uniforms, absolutely beautiful uniforms. They're going to be the home team in Ireland. And then the question is, what does Iowa State do? Because they can do the red and yellow, but Matt Campbell likes to do the black helmets from time to time. This game is a really fun way to kick off college football this year, and I'm very excited about it. I'm probably thinking Kansas State has the advantage just because of continuity. But either way, I'm going to sit back and watch that game with a huge smile on my face.
Just so everybody knows what the situation is scheduling, at noon Eastern, Kansas State and Iowa State are playing over in Ireland. We also have at 4 o'clock, I know everybody's super excited about this one, Idaho State is playing at UNLV. Dan Mullen, look out. Dan Mullen, they're favored by 26.5, according to ESPN. Good God.
Dan Mullen is going to play 2 quarterbacks in that game, and then one of those is Alex Orji from Michigan, and the other is Anthony Colandrea that was at Virginia. So there's some former Power 5 guys that are going to roll up and score a ton of points on the Idaho State. I think it was the Bengals or something like that. But yeah, it's going to be an absolute blowout, but you just want to get through that game because the Kansas game is like right after that, I think.
Kansas is at 6:30 on Fox, so it'll be starting during the fourth quarter of the game with UNLV. Kansas hosts Fresno State. I know nothing about Fresno State. Jalen, I forget the name. Daniels is quarterback. He's been there about 25 years, it seems like.
Yeah, Jalen Daniels in Kansas, and Kurt Warner's son is the quarterback at Fresno State.
Warner. Yeah. So we've got that game on Fox at 6:30. At 7 on CBS Sports Network, it's Western Kentucky hosting Sam Houston. I'm not excited. And then Hawaii is hosting Stanford. Stanford is there. They might be this year, Stephen, the worst team in the Power 4. It's close, but I mean, the stuff they had happen in their offseason, I feel bad for them, but they already have too high academic standards. I don't think they take early enrollees. If they do, I don't remember it. And they just, quite honestly, aren't a big NIL school. They're done anyway. I don't care who. You could bring Vince Lombardi back, but Hawaii is favored over Stanford.
And Hawaii, if everybody remembers, in week 0 2 years ago or something like that, Vandy hung 60 on them when Vandy was beating nobody. I mean, they were going up and down the field with, what is his name, Major Wright or something like Mike Wright at quarterback, just going up and down the field on the rainbows. And it was like, oh, my goodness. And they're favored over Stanford. Now, granted, they're probably a little bit better than they were, but yeah, it's still funny to see. And the way it's weird right now in college realignment, I halfway expected them to say this was an ACC game.
Look, I'm not going to comment on that, but like Stanford is just in the ACC just by proximity. to, staying with Cal. Notre Dame wanted him in there because they play Stanford a lot, et cetera, but they have nothing to do with the ACC. And we all know it. It's just no team in the San Francisco Bay is in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I mean, I don't care what it says. That's just absolutely moronic.
Yeah, Hawaii should get a bid. Hawaii should get a bid in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That's what I want. That is my white whale. That is my Moby Dick. We need to get Hawaii in the Atlantic Coast Conference because nothing about college football makes sense anyway.
That is actually true. That is true. One last thing for you, Steven. Is there anything about this season that you're looking forward to in regards to the quarterbacks? I was looking through the list of like the top 20 teams. Okay. Because like the vast majority of them have new quarterbacks. Austin Simmons is one of those. Is there anything surprising to you about that? Or is this really just that odd of a year? Because it's well over 10 that have new quarterbacks. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on this is if the media and everybody covering college football would treat everybody the same, I would have no problem. But they are so selective on, Jackson Dart's gone, and so Ole Miss is going to take a step back. But Julian Sayin is going to have Ohio State in the national championship game. Arch Manning's going to win the Heisman Trophy. Just be consistent. It's hard to take anything you say seriously whenever you're going so selectively because, that's a school that I've heard of. They will be fine.
Yeah, I find that to be a little bit disingenuous myself. So I'm not surprised by that. I know you're not either. But as the saying goes, it is what it is. And college football is college football. Everybody's got biases. That's part of the fun of it, but it does get annoying at times. Steven, tell everybody where they can find your work.
You can check me out on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, available on all your audio podcatchers and on YouTube. Check us out there. We have a lot of fun back and forth, and you can follow me on Twitter. There's my address down below. Give that a follow and hit me up on all the socials. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, the whole 9 yards. So we have a good time. We like to hang out and watch some ball, and I try to answer questions from time to time. So if you hit me up, I'll hit you up back.
Appreciate that, sir. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods, like Spotify, Apple, Podbean, you name it. And of course, you can find us on YouTube. This has been the crossover with Locked On Ole Miss and the Portal Podcast.